Please stay muted. And if possible, ask questions in the chat. If that's not possible for you, go ahead and unmute yourself. Your camera can be on or off. We don't mind either way. And we are recording, but you'll only show up in the recording if you speak. It'll otherwise be on the presentation, and then either myself or Anna, whoever's speaking. So welcome to tonight's event. We're focusing on emotional regulation tonight, and we consist of myself. I'm Amanda Giordano, the school counselor at Nettlehorst, and my colleague.
I am Anna Solis, and I'm the school counselor at Oscar Mayer.
So we're gonna just jump right in. We wanted to talk about emotional regulation just because it's such a key skill for kids, and especially with all of the stress and all of the trauma that's happening right now, it's something that is really, really important that everyone around our kids is able to support them with. So school, home. So we'll start with definition. So what is emotional regulation? And it's just being able to manage your emotional state. And that consists of being able to check in with yourself, notice, how good of a job, like what are you feeling? How good of a job are you doing with expressing or containing that feeling? Can you control your reactions? Can you change your reactions as needed? And emotional regulation is a skill. And so it's something that does need to be explicitly taught. Obviously, like anything else, some kids are going to be better at picking that skill up, but some are going to need consistent reinforcement, consistent guidance. And part of that is because some of emotional regulation is controlled by your prefrontal cortex, which continues developing into your early 20s. A lot of your emotional regulation is established by the time you're kind of like preschool age, kindergarten age, which makes sense because you have to be able to regulate to make it through that kind of a structured school day. But you want to think of, like, when we think of gross motor skills versus fine motor skills, the younger you are, you start to develop your gross motor skills first. It's the same thing with emotional regulation. So you develop those larger skills, but then we need to refine those smaller skills as our kids get older. And it kind of tied to that, most of that is developed, most of the larger skills are developed by toddlerhood. It is because it's a foundation of social, emotional, and academic learning. If you can't regulate how you're feeling, what your responses are like, you're not going to be able to be attentive in social situations, in a classroom, learning academics. And so another reason why emotional regulation is such an important topic. So I'll toss it over to Anna to talk about some tips.
Yes, so we came up with this list. I mean, the idea is to offer you some pointers and some tips on how to work best when your child is feeling dysregulated. So an important thing to remember is that you want to always remember that the behavior serves as a function. So you want to address the behavior specifically and not the child. You want to work with your child to help them manage their emotions and make some decisions. So it's more of like a conversation as opposed to making a demand. Most importantly, like, it's really approaching and directly addressing the inappropriate behavior or the disruptive behavior, and really focusing on the behavior in and of itself. So staying calm and keeping your directives very simple, sort of to get them to a more calm state themselves, to be able to then go back and think about and talk about the behavior. Have a variety of strategies available, and possibly use some visuals. Depending on the age of your child, the visual is always extremely helpful. It focuses their attention on one particular place. And I mean, like anything else, anything and everything that involves you dealing with your child, right? You want to be mindful of not taking things personally. They are growing. And so sometimes it's it's easier said than done, right? But it's important to remember that because their feelings sometimes they could say hurtful things, but they're really not intending to hurt your feelings. It's more of like, that's the reaction to how they are feeling. Okay, so we want to focus our presentation today on 4 of these main points, and we will sort of develop as the presentation moves forward. We will be focusing on these 4 things. Number 1 is building an emotional vocabulary. So the idea is that we want to encourage kids to be able to name their feelings, and as they get older and as they become more mature, with the ability to name their feelings in a variety of different ways. The importance of making connections between emotions and behavior. Number 3, practicing identifying and controlling reactions. And then number 4, practicing a variety of different strategies and mindfulness techniques. So we believe that our attempt is to cover these 4 things in our presentation today. So step number 1, building an emotional vocabulary. Now, there's a variety of tools out there. These are all linked in, so when the presentation is done, you'll be able to click on these. But the idea is that you want to give kids the opportunity to name exactly how they're feeling. It's difficult to see, but the wheel that you see on the presentation, the one with the multicolors, so in the inner circle, there are specific, words that children are probably more familiar with, like happy, sad, disgusted, angry, fearful, bad, and surprised. So something that we use in our own counseling offices is if a kid comes in, you want to point out to that the feeling in the inner circle, and then you want to branch out. So if you look at, for example, the angry triangle, like a child can identify themselves as being angry, but if you go one step further into the circle, then there's other words that match that angry behavior or that angry feeling. So like let down, humiliated, bitter, mad, aggressive, frustrated, distant, critical. And then you can even go further, and it says betrayed, resentful, disrespected, ridiculed. So as kids get older, or even, the ability to give them the space and the vocabulary to sort of identify how they're feeling is really important. We found these Sesame Street videos for our younger kids, but they are extremely helpful, I think, because it's the characters, Sesame Street characters, having conversations about naming various feelings. So when you're having conversations with kids, even in, just kind of conversationally, to be able to identify the way that you are feeling is really important. Or if you're reading a story, if you're doing a read aloud, if they're talking about a character in particular of a book that they may be reading, it's important to tap into those conversations around how the characters in a story may be feeling as well. So that's one way to build up their vocabulary. Another thing that we want to use, or that we encourage using, is this idea of the zones of regulation. When we're upset or our thinking can't be reached. So it's good to, when our mind is like not thinking straight, it's good to have a visual around. I know Amanda and I were talking about how in our schools, both of our schools, our teachers and our staff tend to use these visuals, and they are familiar with this language. So it's something that could be helpful, because then you can picking a color will help you sort of identify where you're feeling. It's something that's really important, is that this sheet or this visual allows you to identify sort of like where your energy is, but it's also important to remember that there's no bad space on this sheet, right? Like you never want to identify red as being like a negative or bad zone. It's just simply a way to identify where we are feeling. So it's a good tool to use. So if you notice, like you want to maybe have green as being your target space, or the space where you typically want to be, but it doesn't mean that you are not going to be in the various colors throughout the day or a different moment of the week, or, whatever, like your behavior, your emotions are going to change. And that is, again, important conversation to have with children.
And then we were also talking earlier, there are lots of different zoned type check-ins, and I have a variety of check-ins. I've been doing the zones with my students at the beginning of every lesson. I have a couple others that I might try. But even something simple like a thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down can be a really good check-in. Whatever works for your family. So moving on to step 2. So once you've built an emotional vocabulary, you want to help your kid make connections between their emotions and their behavior. So emotions follow the ABC model, which is antecedent, behavior, consequence. And antecedent is just something that happens that triggers an emotion. So what was the situation? What was the event? Was it a failed test? Is it frustration at not being able to get a toy? Is it peer, did or said something, and then behavior is what happens next. I mean, if you melt down, like I knew a kid who every time it was progress report or report card time, it just bawling, overcome with worry and fear, and I mean, just uncontrollable. So the antecedent was grades coming out and going home, and behavior was just complete meltdown. And then, C is consequence. So just whatever happens next. And I always explain to kids, consequence doesn't mean bad thing. We tend to equate consequence with punishment, but consequence can be good. So if you know that your report card's coming home and you got bad grades, if you hold it together, you have an honest conversation, the consequence might be that you establish some trust with your parents, as opposed to if your behavior is, you go and melt down in the office and you have a sick day, so your report card doesn't get to you, that's the consequence of that is that your parent isn't gonna trust you. And so, that's the kind of adult overview, but kids don't realize those connections between what happens and how they act, and then the thing that comes next. And you can help connect those dots for them. So one of them is this cognitive behavioral triangle, and there are lots of examples. I can't link to this one because of the terms of use, but there are lots of examples out there. And so you can use a real life example. So with the boys and the dog, you've got the boy on the left who is thinking, oh my goodness, the big scary dog is off leash and it's going to bite me. And because that's how they think, they're feeling scared. And what they might do is cry, run and hide. And then what might happen, maybe other kids will make fun of them, or maybe they'll feel left out when they can't play with dogs, or when other people are going to play with dogs and they can't go with. And then you've got the kid on the right who's thinking, oh, well, that dog was really well behaved and happy to see me, and so they're probably feeling pretty calm and confident, and they'll probably go and pet the dog, and then there won't be any negative consequences. So you can run through scenarios like that with your kid to help teach them, help show them the connection between what they're feeling and what they do. If you're feeling scared, you might run away. If you're feeling confident, you'll stand there and you'll face the situation. And then another strategy for teaching the connection between emotions and behavior is to debrief. After, like, look for those teachable moments after your kid has been emotionally dysregulated, whether it's their anger was at a 10 with a problem that was the size of a 3, or whether it is a tantrum, a meltdown over, again, maybe a problem that's a 2. Talk to them. And if you attended my positive discipline event, you'll notice that the sheet that I have shared here is really similar to having a restorative conversation. You ask, what were you feeling? What were you thinking at the time? Like, what was going on? What did you want? None of this is judgmental. It's just fact-based. And you want to do this once they're calm. If you try to have this conversation when they're upset, it's just not going to work. Their brain is just, they're too emotional. They can't access the thinking part of their brain. So once they're calmed down, have them reflect. What were you feeling? What was it that you wanted? Did you try any coping strategies? That's what I really like about this sheet in particular, is because it builds those strategies in right there. And if they didn't, then it has those menus, like, what could you have done? And so then the kid can start to connect after the fact. Once they've calmed down, their thinking brain is back online, and they can say, oh, you know what? I was feeling angry and I did want revenge, and that's why I pushed so and so, and and then stormed off. So this is something that's linked that you can do with your child, again, once they've calmed down, and then that reflection can help them just kind of notice the connections. Similar to that, another strategy is identifying triggers. So you have that outsider view. You can notice if there are trends, if it's the same kind of situation or the same type of emotion that your kid is always struggling with. And so sit down with them, and you can go through this what pushes your buttons sheet and have them reflect. I've done this sheet with numerous kids, and it's just incredible how they can all of a sudden realize, like, oh, that is what makes me upset about that situation. I am always getting in trouble at recess, And it is always because of name calling. And so being disrespected pushes my buttons. So maybe I need to go do something else at recess because, like the soccer field, there's always name calling. You can see the light bulbs going off in their head. And then they have something kind of a little bit more concrete to look out for and to avoid. So we can start regulating the behavior a little bit by avoiding those triggering situations, right? And
Mhm.
so, and once they have that identification, then that'll build their awareness in their everyday life, and they'll start to go, name calling, that's happening, I need to move away. Or rumors, I need to step away. I need to tell them that I don't want to be involved. And then we're at step 3.
Yeah, so the next step is learning strategies to manage emotions. So you want to encourage the opportunity, like we said in the step before, to sort of role play and go through some different scenarios. And like, you're going to know your children best. So what are some things that you know are triggers, and maybe prior to a situation where they may encounter that trigger, maybe go through some role play. What are some possible reactions that you can have? What are some decisions that you can make? What are some choices that you can make? So you want to be able to help your child identify the less desired behaviors, that they're, the things that they're really going to, and then trying to brainstorm some things of like, what are some options? What can we do instead of? What are some replacement behaviors? And giving them some concrete spaces to go. So for example, if, hitting or running away, okay, so maybe you plan on running away to this particular place where you can calm down, reflect, take a breather. So sort of having those things in place already at home. And then encourage them to be a part of the conversation with you, because as they are able to identify their triggers, they're also going to be able to come up and brainstorm with you like some possible solutions to their behaviors. And I think that that's helpful when you make them be a part of the conversation, getting to the solution together. It not only does it allow for them to sort of reflect and expand, but then it also gives them some ownership of their behavior. And you have to remember that some of the behaviors are going to require different strategies. It just depends on sort of what is going on and like the behavior that they're feeling. And be open to the fact that there may be some trial and error things. There might be some ideas that you come up with that might flop and you have to reset and try again. So I think it's important to sort of, think those things through and be open to the fact that you might have to reset and redo. There is an article here that we thought would be helpful. It kind of gives you the steps. It's kind of a good one to sort of print out and have handy in case you need it. And it offers some immediate go-to strategies and some additional resources as well. Another thing that we want to encourage our kids to do is to be able to be cognizant of the things that are within their control and things that are out of their control. This visual right here with the circle and the fox, like that's one that I typically tend to use a lot with some of my kids, because I want to remind them like there are some things that are within their control and things that are not. And the ones that are within your control are the things that you want to focus on. So, maybe being anxious over like a test that's coming up, right? Like you can probably control the way that you're feeling about a test, even though you can't control the questions that are going to be on the test. You can control how you approach each question on the test and what happens if you're uncertain or not sure of an answer. Those are some really, and these visuals are really, that's what they're intended to do. So a couple of my kids, their families have actually printed these out and they kind of live in their binder, because it's like, it's there, it's in their binder. You're able to reach out to it when you're feeling a little dysregulation coming on. And it serves to be helpful. So, and then the question that you ask is like, what steps can I take to sort of feel more in control of a situation? So those are important things to remind yourself about. And then also another strategy to use is, how do you shift your thought into a more positive thought? So, understanding that any situation, you can either approach it in a positive way, and the way that you frame it will help you sort of think of next steps or towards a solution. So this example right here, for example, it may not seem like it now, but this feeling will eventually pass. It will not last forever. So if they're feeling fear, if they're feeling anxiousness, if they're feeling frustration, like having some of these visuals and some of these strategies around to remind them that like this feeling is going to pass. Or if you're feeling frustrated about an assignment, knowing that you have the ability to feel the frustration, but then there's the next step to like ask someone for help. Um, so those are important strategies to use. And you know, some of the things that we want to remind families to do is you want to be able to give the kids the space to sort of experiment with these feelings too. That's part of growing and learning. And so if we as adults are always there to sort of offer an immediate quick solution, then we're not giving them enough room to sort of problem solve and get through it on their own. So that's also a very important piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, you know, one thing that I thought about this too is shifting to a positive thought isn't to say that you have to push your kid to ignore bad feelings. That's not the goal.
Right.
There's a lot of toxic positivity. That's just be happy.
Too
Just be
much.
happy.
Right.
That's not the goal. It's about acknowledging, you know, taking that time to feel the feeling, but then taking steps to move on. Having a solution focus rather than a problem focus. And with the negative thoughts and negative feelings, it is easy to get caught in a cycle. So, you know, just finding a way to interrupt that cycle when it's appropriate. So then our last step 4, is practicing all of those new strategies and practicing mindfulness too. Like anything else, practice makes perfect. I don't know if any of you use the Headspace app. I've been teaching about neuroplasticity with some of the kids with my middle school classes in December. We talked about it a little bit, and then Headspace yesterday had their daily morning video was about neuroplasticity, and just explaining how your brain is making these new paths whenever you learn something new and you keep at it. So you don't have the path there right now to use that coping skill. And I used the example of, like, you know, shoveling snow. Because I looked out my window and there was snow, and I said, you know, you think of that like your brain. If you try to cross the street, all that snow is there. It's going to be hard to get through. But, you know, if you go out and you start shoveling, you know, you put in a little effort, it's going to be a little easier. And then you keep shoveling, it's going to be a little bit easier even still to then cross the street. And then once you finally have shoveled your path all the way through, you can get from here to there, no problem. And that's what's happening in your brain when you're trying new things. And that's why practice is so important, because it's establishing that pathway so that, you know, obviously right now, if your kid is struggling to manage anger, they're not going to have a direct path to the coping skill that they need to regulate their anger. But if they keep practicing, they're going to slowly stretch it out until they've got that pathway, and it will become second nature. So part of that, though, is scaffolding in the meantime. So when you're helping your kid practice, you know, you want to find something that's easier. You don't want to jump right into the deep end with something that's going to be really hard. So if you know that they tantrum when you ask them to stop playing their favorite video game, that's probably not going to be the first thing that you want to practice getting them to try their coping skills with. You know, have it be something maybe a little less like what's the word I'm looking for, like preferred, like
Activity.
not quite as preferred. And so, you know, give them a chance to practice on in easier situations with a little bit smaller feelings, and then move them up as they master using those coping skills. And then, you know, set targets for things that might be causing them frustration. And you also want to, part of that is measuring. Ask them, like, what rate you're feeling, how big is your feeling. And I've done that with kids as young as maybe like third grade. They get it. Even some second graders get it. You know, when you point out that you're feeling, the size of your feeling can change, that's really helpful for them to realize, but it's also a good measure of progress. So, you know, ask them how big is your feeling, have them try a strategy, deep breathing, Play-Doh, whatever, and then ask them to rate the size of their feeling again. You also want to practice when your kid's calm, because like you said, your thinking brain when you're upset is turned off. And so you want to practice when they're able to focus, when their brain is able to kind of receive that information, so that when they are upset, when they are dysregulated, they already have that practice and they can recall that strategy, even, a little bit easier every time. And so then thinking about mindfulness. So again, mindfulness is a practice that is building that neuroplasticity, and you can do it anywhere. It's just focusing on the present, focusing on your sensations in your body, you're focusing on your thoughts, and just being accepting and non-judgmental of what you're feeling. And so there are tons of different types of mindfulness. And you can do mindful sensing, with just focusing on what you can hear, what you can see, smell, touch, whether that's inside of your body, whether it's tension or whether it's stuff outside of you. Mindful movement like yoga, or just a mindful walk, like while you're walking, actually feel the like the flow of your foot hitting the ground as you take steps, or you know dance, but dance really, really slow. You can do a body scan where they visualize, check every part of your body from head to toe, and see where there's tension and holding. You can do awareness of thoughts, just kind of see what's going on in your head. Can you pick one thought and focus in on it and then let it go? Breathing exercises, and then guided imagery. And there are a lot of apps that have lots of guided imagery in them. But mindfulness is super important, not just because of neuroplasticity, but there have been countless studies that show that it positively impacts everything on the screen right there. So there's really no reason not to be practicing mindfulness. I've been incorporating it with our staff meetings every week. I've been doing it in a small group that I'm running for middle school, and it's a really nice couple of moments for just to reset. But then it does improve the focus, it does lower stress, it improves your memory, it relationships, everything. It's amazing, all of the benefits of mindfulness. And so you can see, like, all of those things on screen are also going to help with emotional regulation too. So it's really a really good practice to get into. And it does take a lot of trial and error. A lot of kids hear mindfulness and they're like, I don't want to, or they try one thing and they think it's not for them. But it's try something from every different category.
Right. There's a few things on this list that we'd like to share with you so that you can potentially try with your own kids. Breathing exercises like blowing bubbles or a pinwheel. So something as simple as taking out the bubble wand and kind of just blowing the bubble and being mindful of the way that the bubble enlarges, and then blowing another one. Those are really short moments that you can take to sort of stay focused and have your mind be focused on just one thing alone. Encouraging your child to notice new things outside in their classroom, in your home. So if you even just going on a short walk from like one end of the block to the other, and like paying attention to something in particular. Maybe you were looking at, just like the bushes on outside everybody's home, or like just finding one thing to be focused on as you take your walk. Eating a snack really slowly and paying attention to how the food feels, looks, smells, tastes, like just kind of engaging in that opportunity, or watching just something that you can really just focus your energy on, and one at a time. Journaling is something that could be a really mindful moment of just journaling and just writing. If you set your timer for like a minute, or drawing a picture for like a minute, it just really hones in your attention into one particular moment. And that's always very helpful. I know that sometimes when kids have walked into my office and they've had a difficult moment, or they've had an argument with a friend, or they've gotten in trouble, like if they come into my office and it's like, just draw for one, I just want you to take one moment, take a sketch pad, take a pencil, and just draw. It kind of allows you to sort of wind yourself down. So that's always proves to be something pretty effective.
I have to add in that the eat the snacks slowly. I taught a mindfulness lesson last year to fifth grade when we were still in building, and I gave them all the peppermint candies wrapped in the plastic, and guided them through, like, hold it in one hand, hold it with 2 fingers, look at the colors, look at and they were losing it. It was so hard for them to sit there and not just immediately open it up, pop it in their mouth. I'm like, no, unwrap the wrapper and listen to a crinkle. Hold it in your fingers outside the wrapper. Feel it sticky. Put it on your tongue, but don't, move it around. Oh my god, it was so much fun watching them practice that. So I encourage you to do something similar with your kids.
So on the next slide are just a couple different things. Like there is like the breathe in, so pretending that you're smelling the flower, breathing out, pretending that you're blowing a leaf. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5 things that you can see. So wherever you are, pick 5 things that you can see, pick 4 things that you can hear, go through, go do the countdown backwards. Doing a maze that you're just kind of running through with your finger can also prove to be a really quick way to sort of focus your attention and reset. Always serves as positive. And these are some of our resources. Amanda, I'm sorry, I'm taking over your slide here.
That's okay, no problem. Yeah, these are so the Greater Good in Action website, they have tons of different practices. It's curated by the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. They have a podcast too. They're a great resource. Tools for teaching controlled breathing, just some really great fun ideas for breathing, like similar to the pinwheel and the bubble. The grounding strategy cards are 12 cards, like the one on the previous slide with a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's all different kinds of grounding strategies like that. And then I have a virtual calming corner. You may have seen it because it's in all of the homeroom Google classrooms. And then I also have a coping and mindfulness page on my website. And then there are apps listed for mindfulness. You can see most of them are free or with some free access. And so, try them out and see which ones you like. And then we'll go to the next slide and then I'll share a different resource. So then for overall emotional regulation resources, we've got a couple of websites and articles here with just some more ideas and more strategies and more tools for you. So those are all linked. And then the one that I just found today when we're thinking about calming down and drawing, I don't know how many of you like spirographs or liked them when you were a kid, but I just found that there is an online spirograph. And so this can be another calm down strategy that, kids can do anywhere. I mean, maybe you have a real spirograph, and I know that we're tired of computers, but how fun is that? I don't know. So just another tool. I'll link that in there too. I love spirographs. But that's what we had for today. So, we'll open it up for questions. I definitely want to take a minute to thank you for being here, because I know that there are a million things going on. So I appreciate you being here and, just taking some time to arm yourself with information and tools to better support your kids.